So on the 4th of August 2020, the day of the devastating explosion in Beirut, actually in my house, in the balcony, I was finishing my lunch. I remember it was around 6 o'clock. The windows were wide open because it was extremely hot, and because there's no electricity at the time. The average of available electricity power in Beirut, at least in my area, which is Jeitawi, Ashafia, was about 2 hours of electricity power per day and 22 hours of blackout. So no air conditioning, no fan, no ventilation. So I had the windows wide open and I was outside in the balcony just enjoying the rest of my meal before doing some photo editing. And that's when I heard one very unusual sound, which sounded like an explosion. It was in Beirut, but it was relatively far. So I remember one of my housemates coming out of his bedroom and just asking me, "What was that? Did you hear that?" And it occurred to me for a split second that maybe this was an attack, maybe it was a bomb, because it was a very unusual sound. It was a very loud sound. I could actually feel a bit of a shake around when it happened. And I told him, maybe we are being attacked, who knows. I had heard rumors that attack was planned in Beirut sometime during the summer, but I still wasn't sure. And then the second explosion came around 20 to 30 seconds later. And it was this sudden, incredible sound and vibration that just rippled across the buildings and reached our building. It sounded like an airplane flying over our heads and dropping a bomb. And that's when glasses shattered, doors broke, we were propelled indoors with this incredible power. And that's when I thought, we are being attacked, indeed. So I tried to calm myself down, tried to calm my housemate down, who panicked and froze in shock, so he didn't know what to do. And I looked around, everything was broken in the house. I heard loud, very high-pitched screams of horror and pain by people around us in the neighborhood and inside the building. I quickly told him, look, grab a backpack, put your personal belongings there, your money, your wallet, your passport, because if we are being attacked, then who knows? We might not have a house to come back to after this is over. So we decided to evacuate the house as quickly as possible. And I remember that was the moment I actually thought I was going to die, because in my head, 20 seconds had elapsed between one explosion and the other. And so I thought maybe the third explosion will be the end of us, and that will come very soon. So I waited for a few seconds, maybe a few minutes. It did feel like an eternity, waiting for the third explosion to happen, but it never did. And at that point, we were getting messages and checking social media, and people were saying that this was just an accident involving fireworks. But I looked around and I thought, I've never seen this level of damage done by fireworks. So we rushed out of the house. I proceeded to check if our neighbors were okay. Some of them were very injured, bleeding. They had severe cuts, deep cuts. Others were just standing in shock, not moving, not saying anything, just in pure horror. And we tried to get everybody out of the building, still not knowing exactly what had happened. And once I stepped out of the building onto the streets, I gradually realized the extension of the damage. There were broken pieces of broken glass scattered everywhere. Broken windows, broken buildings, people running in panic, not knowing exactly where to go to, where to run to, not really understanding what they were running away from. And at that point I had my cameras, because as a photojournalist I also felt the responsibility to document what was happening. I called my editor and I told her, I'm safe, I'm okay, and I will be out taking pictures of whatever I see. And so I followed the trail of destruction, and the trail was actually increasing in terms of damage, broken houses and shops, injured people. It was pure chaos. I saw all these shops, all these houses, faces, very familiar faces, everyday faces, people I see every day, people I greet every day, all of a sudden completely disfigured by deep wounds and the shock. And I kept on walking, I kept on photographing, and I just could not believe what I was watching. A horror movie. And then I saw this gigantic cloud of smoke coming from the port area, so that's where I headed to. And the more I walked, the more I realized the devastation that was going on in the city. I saw cars flipped upside down, paramedics everywhere trying to rescue as many people as they could. I saw civilians trying to rescue as many fellow civilians as they could as well. But it was a strange mix of shock, of people not really moving, just watching in horror what was happening, and people trying to move as fast as they could to either escape or to help. I saw people being taken away from buildings that were about to fall apart. And that's when I saw the silo burning, the helicopters just trying to put down the fire. And we still didn't know what really had happened. Definitely it wasn't fireworks. The possibility that it had been an attack was still there, but nobody really knew what had happened. I kept on walking, I kept on talking to people. I tried to help a few people on the way as well. There were some people who didn't know how to get to their families in the mountains. There were traffic jams everywhere. And then I realized that the areas of Gemezi and Mandahayel were like a war zone. Buildings had collapsed under the debris. Paramedics by then had no light to work with, so they were just using their phones, the torches in their phones, to have a bit of light to work with and to assist the people. I also visited a couple of hospitals. It was mayhem. It was just pure chaos. Everybody trying to help everybody else, sometimes succeeding, sometimes not, just sending people home because the hospitals were full. Some hospitals got permanently damaged by the explosion, so there was no space for everybody to be assisted. I came home around 3 a.m. I came back to the place where I had experienced the explosion. I sat down in the balcony, I made myself some coffee and some shisha, and I will not let this taint the only place I feel safe in, which is my balcony. So I drank coffee, smoked shisha, I tried to go to sleep, but I just couldn't. It was around 5 a.m., so at 5 a.m. I went out again with the cameras and I tried to document what was happening. There were a lot of shopkeepers trying to evacuate their shops because there were no windows, no door to protect the goods inside. So they feared that the shops could be looted. There were some shopkeepers sleeping in the shops and guarding their shops. People still wandering the street, unable to sleep. Later I realized that not just myself, but pretty much everybody in Beirut found it very difficult to fall asleep in the subsequent days, weeks, maybe even a month or two. That's when something extraordinary happened. Later that day, the day after the explosion, and the following days and weeks, the streets got flooded with hundreds of civilians, volunteers, people with brooms and shovels, and just helping as much as they could to clean the streets, to help rebuild and rehabilitate the shops and the houses. They were giving water and food for free for anybody passing by, and that was something I had never seen before. And I asked them, why are you doing this? And they said, because we know the Lebanese government will not help us, they will not do anything. So we only have ourselves to survive. And that carried on for another 4 days until there was a huge protest involving thousands of Lebanese people merging towards downtown, towards Martyr Square, and demanding justice, demanding the resignation of the president and the government. This was on the 8th of August, and it seemed like changes were about to happen, but then everybody was greeted an endless flood of tear gas bottles, rubber bullets. Some of them were actual bullets that injured people. There were hundreds of injured. And I think that was the first time I actually cried, because I looked around, I saw injured people. Some of these people were elderly people and children who were there using their right to protest against an unbelievable injustice. And instead of having their voices heard, they got shut down and silenced by a formidably aggressive force. The army, the special forces, the police, all attacking these civilians. And it was just too much for me. I could not hold back. I couldn't sustain the tears or the pain. I really felt the pain of the Lebanese people that day. There were a few other protests, but they faded, just like pretty much anything related to protests and the revolution in particular. They come and go, but there isn't any solution in sight when I look around. There's a sense of despair and resignation by the people. They see no solution. They have no hope. The only hope Lebanese people have is get a visa and flee the country. Go away from the country they love, their own country, their nation, their home, and go any place on earth where they will not be attacked in their own homes by a sudden explosion, which to this day has no explanation. There is no official version of what actually happened. And the days went by, people were still unable to sleep, but they were still relentlessly helping each other on the streets, trying to rebuild Beirut. There were some signs of hope. There was a Chilean team on the ground in Gemazia, where they sensed that maybe there was somebody still alive under a destroyed building, and spent 3 days and 3 nights digging, searching, giving hope to the Lebanese people. In the end, they found nothing or anybody, but I think it stayed in the Lebanese people's hearts that at least somebody believed that they could do something, and they tried everything they could to at least find somebody there. So, what to say about all of this? Lebanon is in deep pain of having been conned by the politicians, by the banks, not being able to access their own money, dealing with one of the highest inflations on the planet, seeing that the revolutionary movement, which started almost a year ago, has gone nowhere, with no results. They have seen a government coming and going, a president who remains silent about what happened on the day of the explosion. There is no responsibility, no accountability, no admission of guilt of what happened. There is scarcity of food, of drinkable water. People are jobless and they are struggling, dealing with increasing cost of living in Lebanon overall. So for me, being in one of the most positive and optimistic nations by nature, and living this reality every day and witnessing some of my best friends who have lost relatives and friends, close friends, during the explosion, just saying, "Khalas, enough, we need to leave," is not just a new phenomenon for me, it's a brutally shocking thing to watch. I never thought I would see the day when this would, but here we are. What the future will bring, we don't know. The country is still here, the people are still here. There's still a little bit of hope, but chances are most people are likely to leave before anything good happens to this country again.